Coming up on today's episode of Inside Man United, the headlines. 7 Manchester United players out and 5 players in, potentially, when Dan Ashworth takes over as Director of Football. United's forgotten man, Mason Mount. How far down the pecking order has he fallen, and does he have a future at the club? United could call in Kenyan marathon runners and Kiwi rugby stars as Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos look for new marginal gains to transform the team's fortunes. And finally, Sir Jim Ratcliffe is already making progress on plans for a 90,000-seater new Old Trafford. Details coming up. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for joining me once again. And as always, if you're new around these parts, if you do like the content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. So lots of news circling about United's progress in the Director of Football area. It looks like they have gotten their man Dan Ashworth after a dogged pursuit over the last few months, with Newcastle loath to losing him. However, if an employee's head is turned and they want to leave, there's not a huge amount you can do to make sure they stay. Now, there's talk of there being a compensation package of anywhere between 6 million and 10 million for Ashworth, but there would also be involved with gardening leave. For anyone that's not familiar with that, it's like when you do leave a job, you cannot work for a competitor for 12 months afterwards, just to kind of discourage that kind of a move, either from your competitors or from your employees. Now, it looks like United are prepared to pay Newcastle for their troubles. And I saw a lot on Twitter yesterday, people going, I'm sure he's great, but he's not exactly a footballer. I mean, paying that amount of money for a player or for a staff member is insane. The thing is, you have to look about it this way. He's got one of the best eyes for footballers in the country. His track record is unquestionable. He's got a fantastic eye for a player. If he gives us one transfer that we mightn't have otherwise have gotten, and we sell them, we've more than made up for the money that we had to pay to get Dan Ashworth in. With the connections he has, the track record, his eye for a player, and track record of success with great players within our league and with smaller clubs and smaller teams, it's a no-brainer. If the plan requires a certain piece, and that piece is vital, it's very difficult to put even too high a value on it before you walk away and consider other options. 10 or 15 million, you could blow that on 4 or 5 players and never recoup any of it, and you just kind of move on as a club. Paying this for a vital cog in the board level for United is absolutely essential. If you got to pay 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, fine. You'd barely get a youth player to come in from overseas for 20 million quid. You'd barely get anyone that's worth your while for 20 quid, that's worth a punt. And likelihood is they're not going to make the first team. They're not going to progress. And in all likelihood, you're going to sell them in 4 years' time for, 25 to 50% of what you maybe bought them for. Paying this for a key piece of personnel like Dan Ashworth, I believe, while expensive, while unfortunate, and you'd prefer not, it doesn't take away from the fact that you still should if this is the guy you need. So I'm all for it, and it looks like it's going to happen sooner rather than later. There will be no gardening leave. He's obviously mates with Brailsford, so I really can't wait for this to happen. However, we've got some other stories that we need to cover, so let's get into it. So we're kicking off with United in Focus. There's a few different articles and outlets and publications kind of looking at the lists of players that are at risk and the lists of players that are going to come in as a result of Ashworth and who he's previously worked with, the kind of player that he goes after. So it makes for a fun bit of reading, to be honest. I mean, it's a giddy time for United fans. There hasn't been a huge amount to be giddy about in recent years, and certainly this season. So it says here that United look likely to make Dan Ashworth their new sporting director. It does look like that's going to happen, and here's 6 players he should brutally get rid of. It says 7 in the headline, but there is actually, I think it's 7 when I looked at it earlier. So over the past day or so, this appointment has been speared into the spotlight with Newcastle's man Dan Ashworth, the man who's tipped to arrive at Old Trafford. It would be a huge coup because you're weakening a rival. We've weakened Newcastle, we've weakened Man City by getting Barada and now Dan Ashworth. So in football parlance, it's like a 6-pointer. You're getting 3, they're losing 3. And that's what it feels like. And these are very, very well-respected people, and we're core pieces of the success puzzle at their respective clubs, and are no doubt going to be able to replicate some, if not all, if not more, of that success at our club. So if he is to arrive, this could see the summer where he stamps his authority. Clearly, they want to get this guy in place nice and early, because we need to start drawing up lists of players we want and to have them signed by June or July. So you need the people you need, or you need the people in that you need now. So it's good to see United they're not messing around here. So axing multiple players in order to bring in new talents. Here's 6 he could sell. So obviously there's Jadon Sancho. Looks like he's definitely going to be one that we need to get off the books in terms of wages. So yeah, he's kind of had a mixed time of it at Dortmund. Started well, had a bit of an injury, came back, apparently missed a huge amount of very easy chances in his most recent game. But we'll keep an eye on him from afar and see how that goes. Tyrell Malacia, and this is a funny one. I mean, I think a lot of United fans like him. He's got a bit of a baby face, but he's 24. He's not a baby anymore. I mean, he should be kind of establishing his presence in the squad somewhere at that age. And between his injury worries, he doesn't look any closer to coming back from what has been a very, very serious injury. I personally couldn't understand why we allowed Reguilon go, given that Malacia was still injured and Luke Shaw was coming back from an injury and is injury prone. So I, for the life of me, don't understand. Reguilon wanted to stay. Maybe just United couldn't afford it, but I don't think he was that expensive an addition in terms of his wages, and certainly for the loan fee. So it's baffling to me that United would have left themselves that open. And that's not hindsight. I remember when we decided to let him go, I was like, what are we doing? It's like just the fact that Shaw was coming back and fit. That was enough. I mean, we had to put Lindelof in at left back, I believe. In at left back when Shaw came off against Villa. So it's just kind of like, what is going on? Or did Dalot go left and Lindelof went right? I can't quite remember. But Malacia does not look like a reliable person to have at the left back position as backup. And Luke Shaw, for as great as he is, and one of our better players, and very important, and if he can stay fit, you wouldn't consider getting rid of him. But things are starting to fall off the car now, and you have to start thinking we might get a shilling for him now. Like he's got some real value, and maybe it might be the right time. I mean, something that Ferguson was very good at was knowing when you needed to get rid of players, either to get top dollar for them or to move them on for squad harmony, or to allow a younger buck into the stable to see what they could do as well. So yeah, a knee injury, which was to keep him out until early 2024, but we're now halfway through February. He seems no closer to a return. Lindelof, the Iceman himself, it looks like he is definitely going to be going in the summer. He's very much on the periphery now and getting towards this stage of his career. While he might like to be part of a squad like this, that would be challenging for honours, he's not going to be getting more than 15, 20 games a season if we end up with a first choice pairing that don't get injured, which seems to be the case with Varane and Martinez. So between Shaw, Varane and Martinez, there's a huge amount of uncertainty around United's backline. Like, even the players you want to keep, can they stay fit? So it's not even a quality issue anymore. It's just, who can we rely upon to play? And I think there's going to be a huge amount of activity in the backline this summer. So yeah, look, they're saying players here that we're looking at. Antonio Silva, he's obviously at Benfica with João Neves, defensive midfielder, who's also at Benfica. But we've got Scalvini, Goncalo Inacio, we've got Bremer at Juventus as well, Jean-Claire Todibo. We've got Jeremy Frimpong in the right back position. I mean, and there's another 5 or 6 who I've just kind of forgotten, which you could rattle off easily. Anthony, I think it's quite clear he's absolutely out of his depth in the Premier League, and certainly at Manchester United. He is not good enough for the Premier League. He's a bit of a one-trick pony. Flatter to deceive, essentially, in a weaker league. You can look very, very good in Germany, Italy, Portugal, and the Netherlands, which are very respectable leagues in their own right, but it's a different level at the Premier League. And every player that comes into the league says the exact same thing. The pace and speed at which you need to execute and think is just seconds more than what you're used to. And if you can't reach that next level, you're dead in the water. So yeah, Anthony, he's looking like he's going to go, and we're going to take a massive hit on him, which will sting. But it is what it is. Casemiro, again, someone that we're going to get off the wage books. He hasn't looked like the same player as last year. And these are kind of obvious big ticket items that we know we might be able to get a transfer fee for in Saudi. We certainly need to get them off the wage bill. I mean, there's hundreds of millions here to be saved, not saved in wages, but to be made as a combination of transfers and wages. Apparently, what I heard is that United will be given 300 million to spend, 300 million euro or pounds to spend in the summer, which, to be honest, will only get you maybe 5 top class players. You can throw in a couple of, 20 million, 40 million punts in there, young lads that you're just taking a risk on. But you're only going to be getting maybe 2-3 marquee signings out of that, and then a couple of periphery players to see how they might get on over the following few years. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, someone who would look to cement his place in the team last year, due to kind of a little bit of form and some bad luck with injury. Dalot has come in, and I don't like the revisionism going on with Dalot. Everyone kind of saying that, he's one of the best right backs in the league, and he's been so consistent. He has been a core part of a very badly defending Man United team for a majority of this season. So this kind of he gets an assist or makes a couple of nice blocks and plays a couple of 7 or 8 out of 10 games, and all of a sudden Diogo Dalot's one of the best players at the club. Diogo Dalot is still very, very suspect. He's good going forward. He's got lots of passion. He is a United player in so many ways, but maybe not the most important, which is consistency and just defensive ability as a defender. He's good going forward. He does have his strengths. He's done quite well in a number of games, but is he good enough to be a Premier League, Champions League winning fullback for a team that has ambitions of getting back to the top? The answer's unclear. It's certainly not yes, and maybe a little too early for no, but Aaron Wan-Bissaka, with his injuries, we could still get some money for him. Going back to Palace is a very realistic option, especially if we look like we're going to be getting Olise, and it looks like that is one of the first transfers we're going to be going after. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we're chatting about Mason Mount. Then, of course, Rafael Varane, another high wage earner, maybe not too reliable on the fitness side of things, not getting any younger. His form is not going to be getting hellishly better in a league like the Premier League with his injury record. He might just want to go and get a big fat payday and join up with Ronaldo, with Casemiro, and dominate the Saudi league for a little while. And that's it for that. So they're the outgoings, but we have in 442 a list of the 5 signings that he could bring in. Of course, the first one is Michael Olise. Now, he's a young lad, 22, French, has kind of played a lot of his kind of youth football in England, but is by all rights a French player. And he is starting to kind of become something else now as a player. His stats have never been wow up until now. He's always kind of, even as a young lad, I mean, coming through, he was always like good promise, but nothing kind of stellar that makes you go keep an eye on this kid like you did with Bellingham or Sancho and a number of other young players and Foden. But last year he only got 2 goals for Palace, but he did get 11 assists. So he's always there or thereabouts. This year he's taken it to a new level, and his goals have gone up. His assists are pretty much on par with where he ended up last season, if not better. Couple of hamstring injuries, which are always a little bit suspect and a little bit scary when you're taking on a player, because these things can reoccur over and over again. But it looks like Olise is the number 1 target. And again, we'll talk about it when we're chatting about Mason Mount later on, but it's not good news for Mason Mount, and it's certainly not going to be good news for Marcus Rashford. Able to play as a number 8 or a 10. So he can play out wide. He's not going to be playing as an 8. He's going to be playing as one of the wide players. He's not going to play as a 10. He's going to be playing as one of the traditional 7 or 11s, as you'd imagine. But Garnacho's been doing so well on the right. So does he replace Garnacho? Garnacho's not going to be dropped. So where does Garnacho go? So with Rashford and Garnacho doing what they're doing, for us to be linked so heavily, consistently with a number of different players, not just Olise, it means that one of Garnacho or Rashford is going to be gone. Now, you can say, look at City's team, they have first team players on the bench all the time. United need to adopt that as well. That is correct. But who makes way? Who's the one that's going to be losing 20 games a season as a result of this? You've got to think it's Rashford, to be quite honest. But yeah, he's starting to do well now. He's one for the eye. Evan Ferguson, my boy, Republic of Ireland striker. This guy's a generational talent, but is this the kind of player United need? I mean, he's a great player, but we need someone with a little bit more experience to give Højlund someone to learn off of. Now, he's a great talent, but if Can Hoyland learn so much off a guy in his mid to late 20s who's willing to play second fiddle or partner with a kid just making his way in the game? Would they have enough quality for him to learn off of if they were willing to accept those terms? So I said it in the last episode, it's a very difficult area. So maybe they do have to bring in another young lad, someone who's going to accept playing 30, 35 games a season, coming on for half an hour and sharing those responsibilities with Hoyland, providing healthy competition and cover for when injuries inevitably occur. I'd love to see Evan Ferguson at the club, but he'd be hugely expensive given what Brighton are able to command for their players these days. But as an Irishman, I would love to see an Irishman at Manchester United. There's always been a very good history of Irish players coming through at Manchester, of varying standards, but there was always someone there, and it's a shame we don't have someone there at the moment. There is Johnny Evans, so you can say Northern Ireland, but I still consider him Irish, so apologies for that there, Mr. Evans. So still only 19. Ferguson stands 6 foot tall. He's a robust player. He's a strong player, and he'd play a lot more centrally. Hoyland is able to come in from the left. He did do that a lot with Atalanta. He kind of picks the ball up deep from the left, lays it off, makes a run, gets passed into, and then scores his goals. That's how he likes to do. He likes to combine deep and get into the box late. And it could be a good one there, Evan Ferguson, but again, hugely expensive. Joachim Andersen, Danish centre-back. I wouldn't be a fan of this one. Anderson, he's fine, decent defender, but he's not the kind of player that I think United really should be going for. I'd prefer to go for one of the kind of younger next generational talents that you see coming through in Portugal or in France. And there's plenty of names you've been linked with there. Rooney Bargy, who we've already experienced. I've done a couple of episodes on this guy as well in various news stories. But 18-year-old Copenhagen wide player, very, very good. Scored against us in the group stages. A very strong player. And the fans were singing his name, Rooney, when he scored against us, which was a bitter twist to that name. So yeah, he's direct, skillful, full of pace, ball carrier as well, likes to dribble, likes to take men on. He's very, very brave. And if he comes in, he is only 18, so you can see him maybe coming in the Pellistri mold, come in. He's already starting Champions League games, so I don't think he's going to be looking forward to playing in the reserves at United, but he could be a kind of Pellistri type player that's sitting on the wings. But then what raises questions, what about Diallo? When is Diallo going to get his chances? He's been told he's going to get chances. That's why he didn't go out on loan. But then what's going on with Michael Olise, Rashford? I'm just wondering where all these guys feature and if guys are going to be given a chance. Now, Tejan Koopmeiners, this is a very interesting player for United to be looking at. Atalanta as well, defensive midfielder. Good age, he's 25. Again, I'm always suspect of players that are still plying their trade in a Tier 2 league at 25, 26, coming into the Premiership. I'd want to be getting players from Spain, maybe from Bayern, at a stretch Dortmund, but United have been burnt by that club way too often. So Koopmeiners, he's impressing in Serie A, and he could be someone for Kobe Mainoo to partner with. There's talk about De Jong, okay? I don't get the De Jong link, okay? No doubt a good player, but he's a number 8 style player, very progressive. His defensive statistics are not good, and he's a very forward-thinking player. If we're replacing Casemiro, we need a number 6. Frankie de Jong does not come in and replaces Casemiro. So we've got Frankie de Jong, Bruno Fernandes, and Kobe Mainoo. We get run through with that. We need a defensive player. So all these links with Frankie de Jong, I don't get unless we're selling Bruno. And then Frankie de Jong comes in as the number 10. But if Bruno's staying at the club, Mainoo is an automatic starter now. That much is clear. Which puts Mason Mount in a bit of a pickle, but you've got Mason Mount for 60 million quid. What are you doing with Frankie de Jong? It beggars belief for me. I don't understand it. But if we're going to be going for another midfield reinforcement, we need a defensive-minded player. We were trying to get that out with Amrabat. He is defensive, but he knows how to progress the ball. He's got good medium to long-term range passing. It hasn't worked out. Mason Mount, even as a number 8, when he was supposed to come in and replace Eriksen, when he was coming in at the beginning of the season, that was an unmitigated disaster, albeit because Casemiro wasn't fit and we just got ran right through. But it's tough. But they're the players we've been linked with. Cooper Miners, maybe. He could be all right. I think Yao Neves would be a player I'd be more interested in to kind of play alongside Casemiro maybe for one more year, but I can understand getting rid of Casemiro as well. Yao Neves might be a little bit too young to come in and take over that role in a full-time capacity. But yeah, it remains to be seen. And that brings us nicely on to our boy Anthony here saying United's forgotten man is now worth less than Anthony. I don't think that's necessarily true, but apparently in some list, Mason Mount has now been rated as less expensive than Anthony. Now, Anthony was overpriced anyway. It's well known the scouts have only valued him at 25 to 30. But apparently now, after Anthony's absolute dreadful performances, he's gone from 100 million to 51 million. Just because 100 million was a starting price doesn't mean that he should be valued at 50. He's not worth more than 20 million quid, Anthony. If that. 15. I'd have Elanga over Anthony all day. I'd have Dan James ahead of Anthony all day. So it goes on to say here now that Mason Mount, with all his injuries and all the bad luck he's had, let's just reduce this in size a little bit, just make it a little bit easier on the eye. There we go. Mason Mount joined for 60 million quid. It's been a bit of a disaster for him, though. He's just had non-stop injury problems. And yeah, it just hasn't really worked out for the guy. And no doubt he'll be back when he's fit. But it begs the question, why was he bought? Was he bought to be a replacement for Eriksen? If so, why, if you knew you had Kobbie Mainoo coming through? Why spend 60 million quid when you've got Kobbie Mainoo? And obviously he didn't think an 18-year-old was going to come in and slot straight in, but maybe he should have known that. They're your players. Before you go spending 60 million quid on a position you don't know, when you've got, strikers to buy, centre halves to buy. At the time we hadn't replaced our keeper. It was just such an odd, this is the first transfer out the gate. It still baffles people. And there's a lot of people that like Mason Mount. I didn't really fancy him as a player while he was at Chelsea. I mean, he no doubt has ability. He's, won their player of the season, has been successful with them. But I just never saw this kind of player who was like, Jesus, I'd love him at United. I don't see what he's going to do. If Olise comes in with Garnacho's emergence, Mainoo's emergence, Olise may be coming in, new midfield reinforcements that we've been linked to coming in, I don't see where Mason Mount fits in to this Manchester United puzzle. Is he just going to be a talented bench warmer? Is he going to be like that Gundogan type player that, doesn't start every game but tries to impact and come on with? See, he's ambidextrous. He can play with left foot or right foot, so he can play inverted on either wing and he can play wide on either wing. He is a bit more right-footed than left-footed, but he does play with both feet. He's got a huge amount of flexibility, so he would be useful in that capacity. But 60 million quid's a lot to pay for someone who's useful as a plan B. So I'd love for someone just to sit Ten Hag down and be like, listen, bro, explain this one. Just, enough of the speculating. Just like, what was going through your head? Why did this make sense at the time? Because we haven't been told. And he hasn't been asked a question. And I think people would like to know. So yeah, what happens, Mount? It's saying here he's now worth less than Anthony. Anthony, what has it got here? They're saying Mount's only worth 26 million quid as a result of his injuries, etc., etc. He isn't his arse only worth 26 million quid. And he's certainly not worth half an Anthony. Dalot's up to 50 million quid. Fair play to him. Onana's still at 51. That's a shock. In truth, it's still very early days in Mount's Manchester United adventure. Of course it is. He has looked a little bit weak. It hasn't been a great start for him. But hopefully when he gets back to fitness and he becomes a little bit more of a mainstay in the team, gets a run out, he can find relationships. So it's not just about what position you're good in. It's where on the pitch you can form relationships with other members of the team best. Who do you combine well with? So we'll see. We'll see how things go. But I hope he comes out and has a massive impact. I'd love for him to work out. So United could call in Kenyan marathon runners and All Blacks rugby stars as Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos look for marginal gain. So we heard when Ineos took over that Sir Jim Brailsford's approach to marginal gains was something he's applied to a number of different sporting endeavors that Ineos engage in, whether it's sailing, cycling, football, and they have used try to get advantages wherever they can, relating even to the kind of the smallest things like explosive power on sprinting and the types of injuries that we get. It's quite an interesting article, actually. So Kenyan marathon runners and All Blacks rugby stars may be drafted in to speak to United's players as Ratcliffe and Ineos seem to bring the glory days back. So it's saying here that some of the reports coming out regarding the stadium is an option to move away from Old Trafford has already been ditched. I don't know what that means, because the Old Trafford as we know it, what I've heard is that they are actually pursuing building a brand new stadium about 200 yards northwest of the stadium. So it's still in the area. It's not the exact same patch of grass. I would have no issue with us moving the state. It's not like we're moving 2 miles down the road or 10 miles down the road. We're just moving it there to there. Like if I was living somewhere and I had to knock down my gaff and build it where the back garden was, etc. I mean, it wouldn't bother me. I'm still on my patch. So this Old Trafford has been ditched. I don't think there's going to be a redevelopment. I think a whole brand new stadium is going to be happening, because think about it this way. He's building a mausoleum to himself. This is his Pyramid of Giza that he wants to build, and good on him. Why not? You've got the money. You're not getting any younger. Build yourself a little something nice and give the people something to remember you for. So we see here that they want to build hotels and attractions and all sorts of stuff. They're already pitching business partners. They've already lobbied the government, of course, for the the levelling up scheme. They're talking about redistributing wealth across the country and not just keeping it into the southeast of England, and things like that. So Ratcliffe's firm are performance partners with the New Zealanders and medics from the All Blacks camp, and they've worked with Nice before, which is cool. Regarding kind of injuries that were being sustained was very similar to the injuries players would get in rugby due to the way they move. In recent times, marathon runners from the Ineos-backed NN group have also given talks to All Blacks players on mentality and endurance. The prospect of both heading to the club's Carrington base at some point is thought to be likely. And then with Dan Ashworth coming in as the sporting director, and then they're looking also maybe at the Southampton director of football, Jason Wilcox. So it just goes into some detail here. Brailsford has harnessed his marginal gains philosophy in other sporting ventures, and when Eliud Kipchoge from Ineos-backed NN Professional Running Group broke the marathon world record and went sub 2 hours in 2019, took advice from those within Ineos' sailing and motor racing ventures as well. At Ineos-owned League One Nice, Kenyan running coaches have been introduced to give tips to players on pace explosions and quicker off the mark. So if you want your people to run better, well, why not get the best runners in the world to tell them how to do that? Makes a lot of sense. Similarly, when wingbacks at the French club began to suffer from a muscle problem more common with stop-start nature of rugby, they brought in medical experts from the All Blacks to try and kind of sort out these injuries and see maybe if they need to train better nutrition, recovery, that kind of thing. So it's very, very interesting stuff. And these are the kind of things that you need to bring in to give yourself an edge. Of course, as long as you've got the basics done, which they're also working on as well. Mental endurance as well. So it's not just about the physical, it's about how these athletes think. I mean, you get the best athletes in the world, their mentality is what gets them to the top. Physicality is one thing, but what really separates people at the top is their mentality. And so 59-year-old Brailsford is at the heart of this after making a career on the back of his marginal gains philosophy that he had at British Cycling. Sir Alex Ferguson previously visited the velodrome, later dubbed the Gold Medal Factory, and on a later trip discussed with Brailsford how to ensure all within a team were committed to the common goal. Ferguson leant over and delivered a typically blunt line in his native Glaswegian tones. Dave, he said, it's simple. Just get rid of you can make up whatever that word is. Interesting. I think it's really exciting. I love to see these kind of new, fresh ideas coming in from the man himself here. There's Brailsford. And looks exciting. And Sir Jim Ratcliffe is already making plans for a 90,000 new Old Trafford, which is going to be the Wembley of the North, and just not just be a fantastic football ground, but to provide something that is just, for the community, for that area of the country. It goes beyond football, and that's what I meant when this is his kind of Pyramid of Giza in a way, and it lends itself very well to the current programs the government is trying to run with this levelling up. So it's a good time to do it now. Of course, United were offered cities ground after the Olympics, which they refused because they wanted to stay at Old Trafford. So Manchester City just got to come in and get a brand new stadium all for themselves for next to nothing, which was handy for them. So the group is leaning towards a rebuild on land at the side of United's iconic home, which I mentioned, and they want to do something along the same lines as Tottenham. So you can see here, that's obviously Old Trafford. That's Old Trafford as well. So this would be the new Old Trafford, and this is where they're thinking of building it. So this is the stadium where it is now, and that's where it's going to be. So big plans. They want to make a 90,000 seater. To be honest, if you're already going to build a brand new one, make it 100. Go 6 figures. Just go hard. Go hard. Build 100, and you'll still pack it out. So it's already been reported that talks have taken place with local politicians about different programs that can get involved with this. The FA have been spoken to as well, and INEOS have experience in finding funding over vast infrastructure projects as well. They're currently in the process of building a new £5 billion chemical plant in Belgium. These guys know what they're doing with property as well. They know how to do football. They know how to do property, and it's a very exciting project. And I think most United fans are okay with Old Trafford kind of being moved slightly over there, and we'll see how that goes on. But I think you need to do it. You can cling on to the past too much, and you just need to evolve. And I think most fans would be happy to see us do that. And that is it for the main headlines today. So what do we make of the news headlines? What do you think? Thoughts in the comments. Do you prefer a completely new rebuild of a stadium, or is the old romantic in you saying we cannot leave Old Trafford? We need to do what we can to stay there. Sometimes you got to take the romantic kind of hat off you and put on the practical, forward-thinking futurist view of doing things. And I think we're just kicking the can down the road, that even if we do upgrade Old Trafford within 15-20 years, we're going to have to do something else, and technology will come on so far. A rebuild allows you to future-proof. Right now we're trying to build it up to something that is acceptable today. With a new rebuild, we get to future-proof this building 20-30 years in advance with modern technology. It's a no-brainer to me, but again, funding would be required. But yeah, thoughts in the comment section. And what do you make of those lists, the 6 or 7 players out and the 5 players in? I agree with most of it, to be quite honest, at least in terms of the players out. On players in, only a couple that I think I'd want to see coming in. But yeah, please, thoughts in the comments, and let me know what players you would like to see Dan Ashworth bringing in as well. And interesting news on Brailsford and the Marginal Gains team, bringing in players from different sports for different reasons, for injuries, recovery, mental toughness. I think it's great. I'm all for it. I want to see more of that. So like seeing these kind of fresh forward-thinking ideas coming into the club while we're kind of starting to build things from scratch again and getting our house in order. As always, thank you very, very much for joining me. I appreciate it. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and as always, I will see you on the next one.